Hey there. Welcome to Darkfall Lullabies, here to help you relax tonight. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community it is. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together. Story 1, The Request. Ethan Crow never expected the letter to arrive. Not because it was threatening, not because it was strange, but because it was addressed in a handwriting he recognized. His own. The envelope was old, yellowed at the edges, its paper brittle like it had traveled through years instead of miles. There was no return address, no stamp, just his name written carefully, patiently, as if whoever wrote it had all the time in the world. Ethan Crow. Spelled exactly the way he wrote it as a child. He stood in the hallway of his apartment, rain tapping softly against the window behind him. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Each second stretched longer than the last. He hadn't written a letter in years. Yet when he opened it, his hands began to shake before he even read the words. You said you would come back. The house remembers you. So do I. There was no signature. Ethan read the letter again and again. A dull pressure settled behind his eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the unmistakable feeling of something recognizing him. That night, sleep came in fragments. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw fog rolling over a narrow road, heard the creak of a wooden porch, felt the weight of a place he had never been or had forgotten. By morning, the name surfaced from somewhere deep and unwanted. Black Hollow, a town that did not appear on any modern map, and a house at its edge that had been waiting. By the time Ethan reached the edge of Black Hollow, the rain had become something more deliberate. It wasn't falling hard, it wasn't trying to soak him, it was simply there, a constant, quiet presence, like the town itself breathing. The road narrowed without warning. Smooth asphalt gave way to cracked pavement, then gravel, then something closer to packed dirt. The trees leaned inward, tall and skeletal, their branches tangling overhead like fingers interlocking. Ethan slowed the car, his headlights struggling against the fog. Black Hollow announced itself without a sign. No welcoming words, no name, just a cluster of dim lights ahead, scattered and uneven, as if the town had grown without planning or permission. He parked near what appeared to be the center, if Black Hollow even had one. A single street lamp flickered weakly, its light buzzing, casting long shadows that shifted even when nothing moved. The silence was unnatural, not peaceful, expectant. Ethan stepped out of the car. The air was cold, heavier than it should have been, pressing gently against his chest. Somewhere nearby, water dripped steadily, rain sliding from roof to ground, again and again, like a slow countdown. The first thing he noticed was how still everything was. No music, no distant engines, no voices. Yet he had the unmistakable sense of being observed. He walked toward a small building with a faded sign hanging crooked above the door. Black Hollow General Store. The bell rang when he entered. The sound echoed longer than it should have. Inside, the air smelled of dust and damp wood. Shelves were half-stocked,
their contents oddly outdated, labels faded, packaging styles decades old. Behind the counter stood an elderly woman with silver hair pulled tightly back, her posture rigid. She was already looking at him. "You're early," she said.
Ethan hesitated. I think you might have me confused with someone else." The woman studied him carefully, her pale eyes sharp despite her age. She did not smile. "No," she replied, "I don't think I do." She reached beneath the counter and produced a ledger, its pages yellowed and thick. Her fingers traced a line slowly, deliberately. "Crow," she said aloud, "you always come back sooner or later." A chill moved through Ethan that had nothing to do with the cold. "I've never been here before," he said. The woman finally looked up. "That's what they all say." Ethan glanced around the store, suddenly aware of how isolated he was. "How long has this town been here?" he asked.
Margaret shook her head. "No one owns it," she said. "It owns time." The way she said it made Ethan's skin prickle. "People disappear there?" he asked. Margaret paused. "People remain," she corrected. Silence filled the space between them. Finally, Ethan asked the question he had been avoiding. "Has anyone named Thomas Bell lived here?" Margaret's hand froze mid-motion. Slowly, she reached beneath the counter again and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the wood. The image showed a man standing in front of a familiar shape, a house barely visible through fog. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, his posture stiff. On the back, written in neat, careful handwriting, were the words, "Thomas Bell, returned, year unknown." "He asked questions too," Margaret said softly. "That was his mistake." Ethan swallowed. "What happened to him?" Margaret met his gaze. "He never left," she said. The bell above the door rang again, this time without anyone entering. The lights flickered. Margaret's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The house doesn't like to be ignored," she said, "and it hates being forgotten." Ethan backed away from the counter. "I just want answers." Margaret shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "You want permission." She glanced toward the door. "You won't get it." Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the street lamp entirely. As Ethan stepped back into the rain, he noticed something that made his breath catch. Every window in the surrounding buildings was dark. Every one except a single house at the edge of the town. A faint red glow pulsed behind its curtains, waiting. The road to the house did not appear on the map Margaret had shown him, not because it was hidden, but because it refused to be fixed in one place. Hollow Road began as a narrow stretch of wet gravel, bordered by trees so dense they seemed woven together. As Ethan drove, the fog thickened, pressing against the windshield like breath against glass. His headlights cut through it only a few feet ahead, revealing the road inch by inch, moment by moment. The farther he went, the quieter the world became. No wind, no insects, not even the sound of rain striking leaves, only the soft hum of the engine and something else, a low, distant sound, not quite a voice, not quite silence. Ethan slowed the car to a crawl. That was when the house emerged. It did not rise suddenly from the fog. It separated itself from it, as though the mist were reluctantly letting go. The structure was tall and narrow, its silhouette sharp against the dark sky. Wooden boards ran vertically along its exterior, warped and darkened by age. The windows were tall and thin, their glass opaque with grime, reflecting no light. No warmth, no welcome, just presence. Ethan parked at the edge of what might once have been a driveway.
The moment he turned off the engine, the low sound stopped. The silence returned. He remained seated for several seconds, his hands still on the steering wheel. His reflection stared back at him from the windshield, pale, tense, unfamiliar. When he stepped out of the car, the air shifted. It felt colder here, not sharper, just older. The front porch creaked beneath his weight, each step answered by a soft groan from the wood, as though the house were acknowledging him piece by piece. A single light flickered above the door, glowing faintly red, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. There was no doorbell. Ethan raised his hand to knock. Before his knuckles touched the wood, the door opened on its own. Not suddenly, not violently, just enough.
The darkness inside was complete. Ethan hesitated, then stepped forward. The door closed behind him with a soft, deliberate click. Inside, the house smelled faintly of damp earth and old paper. The floor beneath his feet was smooth, worn down by time rather than footsteps. The walls were bare, their paint cracked in thin lines that resembled veins. A narrow hallway stretched ahead, disappearing into shadow. The moment Ethan took his first step inside, the low sound returned. Closer now. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. He followed the hallway slowly, his breathing shallow. Each step felt slightly delayed, as if the floor were remembering his weight before allowing it to move on. Rooms branched off to either side. A sitting room with furniture draped in white sheets. A dining room set for a meal that had never been eaten. A mirror at the end of the hall, its surface cloudy, refusing to reflect clearly. When Ethan passed the mirror, he felt something shift behind him. He did not turn. The staircase rose at the far end of the hall, its banister carved with intricate patterns, symbols that seemed to twist when he stared at them too long. As he placed his foot on the first step, a whisper brushed against his ear. Ethan, his name, spoken softly, affectionately. He froze. The whisper came again, this time from below the stairs.
"You're late."
Ethan swallowed hard. "I didn't know where you were," he said, his voice barely louder than the rain outside. The house responded with a slow, almost contented creak. He climbed. The upstairs hallway was narrower, the ceiling lower, pressing down gently, insistently. Doors lined both sides, each one closed. From behind them came faint sounds, breathing, shifting, something turning over in sleep. Ethan stopped in front of the last door. Unlike the others, this one was slightly open. A red glow leaked from the gap. Inside was a bedroom, simple, bare. A single bed stood against the far wall. A desk sat near the window, its surface covered in papers, drawings, letters, all written in the same handwriting. His. Ethan approached the desk slowly. He picked up the top sheet. It was a letter. "I'm starting to remember now. The house isn't angry. It's lonely." Another page. "It keeps the parts people leave behind. Names, dreams, shadows." His heart pounded. The final page lay beneath the others. Short, direct. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't leave. Neither will you." Behind him, the bed creaked softly. The whisper returned, closer than ever. "You said you'd stay." Ethan turned. The bed was empty, but the indentation in the mattress was deep, as though someone had just risen from it. The red glow pulsed once, twice. Then the lights went out. Ethan woke to the sound of breathing. Not his own. It was slow, measured, close enough that he could feel it against his neck. For a moment, he didn't open his eyes. He stayed perfectly still, listening. The air in the room was cold and heavy, pressing down on his chest like an extra blanket soaked in rain. The breathing stopped. Silence settled again, thick and watchful. When Ethan finally opened his eyes, the bedroom was dimly lit by a pale red glow seeping through the cracks in the walls. The bed beneath him felt unfamiliar, too firm, too narrow, as if it had been shaped for someone else, someone who fit better. He sat up slowly. The desk was still there. The papers were gone. In their place lay a single object, a small audio recorder, old-fashioned, scratched, its red light blinking softly. Ethan stared at it for several seconds before pressing play. Static filled the room. Then a voice, his voice. "I didn't think it would take this long," the recording said. "The house, it doesn't let go easily. Every room holds on to something. You don't notice at first. It feels like shelter." A pause. "You think you're resting." Static crackled again. "But the rooms are listening." The recording ended. The red light on the recorder turned off. The glow in the walls dimmed. Ethan swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. The floor was colder than before, sending a dull ache up through his feet. As he reached for the door, he noticed something carved into the wood. A mark. Not a symbol. A tally. Dozens of thin lines scratched into the surface, uneven and frantic, as if someone had been counting days or attempts. He opened the door. The hallway had changed. It was longer now, stretching farther than it should have. The ceiling sloped downward, forcing him to hunch slightly as he walked. The doors along the walls were no longer evenly spaced. Some were too close together. Others sat alone, isolated, their frames warped inward like mouths pulled into frowns. From behind one door came a soft, rhythmic sound. Knocking. Ethan stopped. The knocking wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. It was patient. 3 slow taps. A pause. Then 3 more. Against his better judgment, he approached. As he reached for the handle, the knocking stopped. The door creaked open on its own. Inside was a child's bedroom. Small, narrow, painted in faded blue. A single window showed nothing but thick fog pressed against the glass, unmoving. A toy train lay frozen on a track near the foot of the bed. The air smelled faintly of dust and old rain. Ethan stepped inside. The door closed behind him. The temperature dropped instantly. On the far wall hung a series of drawings, taped in a crooked line. Stick figures, houses, trees, all drawn in black pencil, except for one detail. Every house had its windows colored red. At the center of the room stood a small desk. On it lay another recorder. Ethan didn't touch it. It turned on by itself. A child's voice crackled through the speaker. "I told you it was just for the night," the voice whispered. "They said the house would keep me safe." A pause. "I don't think they knew it was hungry." The toy train began to move, slowly at first, It rolled along its track with a soft clicking sound. As it reached the end, it didn't stop. The track extended, metal pieces sliding into place across the floor, stretching farther than the room should allow. The train followed. Ethan backed away. The drawings on the wall began to change. New lines appeared, sketching themselves in real time. The stick figures grew taller, thinner, their faces darkened, eyes hollowed out. One figure stood apart from the others. Its shape was familiar, too familiar. Ethan turned and ran. The hallway seemed to breathe as he sprinted, the walls flexing inward, narrowing his path. Doors slammed shut as he passed them, each impact echoing like a heartbeat. He burst into the sitting room downstairs. The sheets had been removed from the furniture. Figures sat in the chairs now, not bodies, impressions. Shallow depressions in the cushions, shaped like people who had been sitting there for a very long time. The air buzzed softly, filled with overlapping whispers, names spoken too quietly to understand. At the far end of the room, a fireplace flickered with a dull red light. Above it hung a mirror. This one was clear. Ethan approached cautiously.
His reflection stared back at him, eyes sunken, face drawn tight with exhaustion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the reflection blinked. Ethan did not. The reflection leaned closer to the glass. "You're remembering," it said. Ethan staggered back. "I don't understand," he whispered. The reflection smiled. "That's the first thing it takes," it replied. "Understanding." Behind him, the whispers grew louder. The figures in the chairs shifted. The house creaked, a deep, satisfied sound that rolled through the walls. "You came back on your own," the reflection continued. "Most don't." Ethan shook his head. "I was looking for someone." The reflection's smile faded. So was the house.
The mirror darkened suddenly, the glass clouding over as the red glow pulsed one final time. A sharp crack split the surface, running straight through the reflection's face. The fireplace went out. Darkness swallowed the room. In the black, the breathing returned. Not one breath, many, all around him, close. Ethan felt the floor beneath his feet soften slightly, as though it were sinking, giving way inch by inch. Hands brushed against his ankles, cold, hesitant, exploratory. A whisper rose above the others, familiar and calm. "You can rest now." The house exhaled, and the door at the front of the house unlocked itself.
Ethan didn't move. The front door stood open at the end of the hallway, a pale rectangle of fog-filled night beyond it. Cold air drifted inside, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant rain. Freedom. At least, that's what it looked like. The hands around his ankles withdrew slowly, reluctantly, like something being pulled away before it was finished. The breathing faded, sinking back into the walls, into the floorboards, into places he couldn't see. The house waited. Ethan took one step toward the door. The floor creaked in protest. Not a warning, a reminder. The whispers returned, softer now, layered and overlapping, each voice carrying its own weight. Some were young, some were old, some sounded tired beyond anything human. He turned away from the door. The sitting room stretched before him, darker than before. The chairs were no longer empty. Shapes had begun to form within them, faint outlines like shadows pressed into fabric. Not fully there,
not gone. Ethan approached the nearest chair. As he did, the outline sharpened. A man sat there, his posture slumped forward, elbows resting on his knees. His face was indistinct, blurred like a reflection in moving water, but his voice was clear. "I only needed one night," the man said quietly, "just somewhere to stop." The room shifted. Ethan was no longer standing in the sitting room. He stood on the side of a long, empty highway. Rain poured down in sheets, blurring the headlights of a car pulled over on the shoulder. The man sat behind the wheel, gripping it tightly, his knuckles white. "I was so tired," the voice continued. "I thought I was seeing things." The house appeared ahead, its red-lit windows glowing softly through the rain. It looked warm. The scene dissolved. Ethan staggered back into the sitting room, gasping. The man in the chair had faded again, his shape less defined than before, as though telling the story had cost him something. Another chair stirred. This time, a woman's voice rose, calm but hollow. "I was running from something," she said. "I didn't care where I ended up." The walls around Ethan melted into darkness, replaced by a narrow forest path. Branches clawed at invisible skin. Her footsteps were frantic, uneven. She tripped, fell, looked up, and saw the house waiting between the trees. I didn't hear it breathe until I was inside. Back in the sitting room, Ethan's chest tightened. One by one, the impressions in the chairs spoke. A college student who missed the last bus, a couple whose car broke down in the fog, a child left behind during a storm. Each story ended the same way. They stayed. The house listened, and slowly it kept them. Ethan backed toward the hallway, his pulse pounding. The door upstairs creaked open by itself, the sound sharp and insistent. The house wasn't just showing him memories, it was introducing him. Upstairs, the hallway was narrower still. The doors were open now, revealing rooms filled with fragments of lives, suitcases left unpacked, phones frozen on unread messages, clocks stopped at different hours. Time had not passed here. It had pooled. At the end of the hall was a door Ethan hadn't seen before. It was red, not painted, glowing from within. As he approached, the whispers fell silent. The door opened. Inside was a room with no furniture, no windows, only walls covered floor to ceiling in writing. Names, thousands of them, some scratched deep into the wood, others faint, barely visible as though they had been written by hands that were already fading. Ethan scanned the walls, his breath shallow. He found his name near the center, written twice, one fresh, one old. "I wondered how long it would take," a voice said behind him. Ethan turned slowly. Margaret stood in the doorway.
She looked the same as she had at the gas station, calm, composed, untouched by time. The red glow softened her features, casting long shadows across her face. "You came back faster than most," she continued. "That usually means the house already knows you." "What is this place?" Ethan demanded. Margaret smiled faintly. "A place for what people leave behind," she said. "You don't disappear all at once, you know. You shed pieces, regret, exhaustion, loneliness." She stepped aside, revealing the hallway beyond her. "The house gathers them." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't agree to this." "No one does," Margaret replied gently. "But you stayed once before." The walls pulsed. A memory flooded back, fragmented, incomplete. Rain, a fight, the sound of his own voice saying, "I just need somewhere quiet."
"I left," Ethan whispered. Margaret's expression softened. "You tried." The door behind him began to close, slowly, deliberately. The whispers returned, louder now, no longer patient, hungry. Margaret met his eyes. "You still have a choice," she said, "but it won't wait." The red light flared. The house leaned in, and somewhere deep within its walls, something began to count. The counting sound was slow, measured, not loud enough to panic, just loud enough to notice. Ethan didn't know where it was coming from. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a clock. It was deeper than sound, like something marking time inside the walls themselves. 1. Pause. 2. The red glow in the room dimmed slightly with each count, as if the house were conserving something. Margaret remained still, watching him closely. "It always starts small," she said. "People think they're still themselves at first." Ethan swallowed. "What does it take?" Margaret glanced at the walls covered in names. "Certainty," she replied. The word hung in the air. The counting continued. 3. The hallway beyond Margaret shifted, stretching longer, its shadows deepening. The whispers seeped back in, threading through the silence like cold fingers. Ethan stepped away from the closing door. "I'm leaving," he said, though the words felt thinner than they should have. Margaret nodded slowly. "Then don't stop walking." She moved aside. The hallway waited. Ethan stepped past her, his footsteps echoing too loudly for the narrow space. The doors along the corridor trembled as he passed, their frames shuddering as if something inside them wanted out. 4. A door to his left burst open. Ethan barely had time to stop before the room pulled him in. It was a bathroom, small, dim. The mirror above the sink was fogged, though the room was cold. The sound of running water echoed softly, though the faucet was dry. Ethan approached the mirror cautiously. He wiped a circle clear with his sleeve. His reflection appeared, then lagged. He tilted his head. The reflection hesitated before copying him. "You feel lighter yet?" the reflection asked quietly. Ethan stepped back. The reflection didn't. It continued. "I remember when I first noticed, thought it was exhaustion, thought it would pass." The counting reached 5. The reflection smiled. "You're already missing pieces." The mirror cracked. Ethan stumbled out of the bathroom as the door slammed shut behind him. The hallway reformed around him, slightly narrower now. The house had adjusted. He reached another room, this one warm, softly lit, almost comforting. A bedroom neatly arranged. A suitcase sat on the bed, half packed. Ethan's suitcase. Clothes he remembered folding, items he didn't remember bringing. A phone lay on the nightstand, then lagged. He tilted his head. The reflection hesitated before copying him. "You feel lighter yet?" the reflection asked quietly. Ethan stepped back. The reflection didn't. "I remember when I first noticed," it continued. "Thought it was exhaustion. Thought it would pass." The counting reached 5. His phone. The screen lit up on its own. A message waited. "Unknown sender. You forgot this." Images scrolled across the screen. Photos of moments Ethan couldn't place. Standing outside the house in daylight. Sitting at the desk. Sleeping in the bed upstairs. Days, maybe weeks. "I didn't forget," Ethan whispered. 6. The warmth drained from the room instantly. The bed sagged as though someone unseen had just stood up from it.
A whisper brushed his ear. "You rested." Ethan fled. Down the stairs, past the sitting room, toward the front door. It was still open. The fog beyond it rolled gently, inviting.
7. As he crossed the threshold, his vision blurred. The world outside seemed flatter, quieter, wrong, like a photograph left out in the rain. He stepped onto the porch. The house groaned, painfully. Behind him, Margaret's voice carried softly. "If you leave now," she said, "you won't remember why you came." Ethan froze. The counting paused. "That's how it protects itself," she continued. "People forget what they were running from. They forget the cracks. They forget the pull." The fog shifted, forming vague shapes, roads, cars, places he knew. "But you'll feel it," Margaret said. "Every night, the emptiness, the sense that something important is missing." 8. Ethan turned back toward the doorway. The house seemed to lean closer. "What happens if I stay?" he asked. Margaret met his gaze.
"You'll remember everything," she said, "until you don't." The whispers rose, no longer hidden. 9. The red light flared throughout the house, bright enough to hurt. The walls creaked and stretched, the names glowing faintly as though freshly written. Margaret stepped back into the hallway. "The house is patient," she said, "but it hates indecision." The counting resumed. 10. The door behind Ethan began to close, slowly, not forcing him, waiting for him to choose.
Ethan stood frozen on the porch as the door moved inch by inch behind him. The fog ahead waited. The house behind him waited too. Neither rushed him. That was the worst part. He had always believed choices were loud things, panic, urgency, pressure. But this was quiet, gentle, almost respectful, like the world was giving him space to make a mistake properly. The door stopped moving, half open, half closed. The counting had ended. Or maybe it had simply moved somewhere deeper. Ethan took a step forward. The fog shifted, revealing the faint outline of the road. His car waited somewhere beyond it. Safety, distance, forgetting. Then he took a step back. The porch creaked softly, as if relieved. The door responded, opening just a fraction wider. The house approved. "You're still standing," Margaret said calmly from inside. "That means it hasn't taken what it wants yet." Ethan turned to face her. "You said there was a choice." "There is," she replied. "It's just not the one people think." She gestured toward the interior. "Come inside." The door closed behind him the moment he crossed the threshold. Not gently this time, not violently either. Final. The air inside felt heavier, thicker, like it had absorbed too many breaths over too many years. The red glow pulsed slowly, weaker than before, as though the house were conserving energy. Margaret led him down a hallway Ethan didn't recognize. "This part isn't for everyone," she said. "Most never see it."
The walls here were smooth, unmarked, darker than the rest of the house. No doors, no writing, no whispers. Just footsteps. At the end of the corridor stood a staircase descending into darkness. Ethan hesitated. "What's down there?" he asked. Margaret paused. "The part that decides," she said. They descended. The stairs seemed endless, spiraling downward without pattern or rhythm. Ethan lost count of how many steps they took. The air grew colder, drier, stripped of scent. At the bottom was a wide room, circular. Its walls curved inward slightly, giving the impression of being watched from every direction at once. In the center, stood a single chair. Facing it was a wall of glass, not a mirror, a window. Beyond it was another room, identical, and in the chair on the other side sat Ethan, or something very close to him. The figure stared back, expression calm, posture relaxed, too relaxed.
"I don't understand," Ethan whispered. "That's good," Margaret said. "Understanding comes later." The other Ethan stood. He smiled. "I remember this part," the reflection said. Ethan's stomach dropped. "You remember what?" he asked. The other Ethan stepped closer to the glass, convincing myself I still had time. The room began to hum softly. The walls vibrated, just enough to be felt in the bones. Margaret spoke quietly. "The house doesn't trap people," she said. "It offers relief, a pause, a place where you don't have to move forward." The other Ethan placed his hand against the glass. "So many people are tired," he said. "You felt it too. The world asking for things you didn't have left."
Ethan shook his head. "That doesn't mean I belong here." The reflection laughed softly. "That's what I said." The glass rippled. Images flowed across its surface. Ethan saw himself arriving at the house the first time, younger, angry, hollow. He saw himself sitting in the upstairs room, writing letters he didn't remember, sleeping for hours, days. "I stayed because it was quiet," the reflection continued, "because nothing followed me in." Margaret's voice lowered, and the house noticed. The images shifted again. Ethan saw moments where the reflection chose not to leave, not because he couldn't, but because it felt easier not to. Each time the house grew warmer, kinder, hungrier. "What happens to him?" Ethan asked. Margaret didn't answer. The other Ethan leaned closer. "He's still here," he said gently, "just thinner." The glass cracked slightly, hairline fractures spreading outward from where the reflection's hand rested. "You can still go," the reflection whispered. "But if you do, I stay." Ethan's breath caught. "You mean one of us belongs to the house," the reflection finished. "It doesn't care which." The humming grew louder. The chair behind Ethan scraped softly across the floor, inviting. Margaret stepped back. "It will take one of you," she said. "It always does." The red glow surged faintly through the cracks in the walls. The house waited, not for Ethan to choose to leave, but for him to choose who stays. The house had grown quieter. Ethan noticed it immediately. The whispers had thinned, leaving only the soft hum of the walls, vibrating faintly beneath his feet. The red glow receded into corners, leaving shadows that seemed almost alive, patient, but no longer insistent. Margaret's silhouette appeared at the end of the hallway. "You're close," she said. "You'll see now what the house really chooses to keep and what it releases." Ethan swallowed. He didn't move. Behind him, the door that had once opened to endless rooms now stood closed. The front porch, the fog outside, all seemed distant, unreal. Only this hallway existed, stretching forward, walls bending slightly inward as if encouraging him to move faster. "Why is it letting me see this?" Ethan asked. Margaret's eyes glinted in the faint light. "Because you're ready, or almost ready. The house tests the ones who come back, not with fear, not with pain, but with choices." The first door on the left opened slowly, revealing a room filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflected a version of Ethan, some younger, some older, some thinner, some heavier, each one moving independently, unaware of the others. He stepped inside cautiously.
The mirrors whispered in unison, soft, fragmented words that he couldn't understand. And then one spoke clearly. "Do you want to stay?" Ethan froze. The other versions of him looked directly at him from the glass. Each reflected a different life he could have lived, or might still live. "You can leave now," Margaret said softly from the hallway. "The house will release what it doesn't need, but you must decide before it decides for you." He walked forward, scanning the mirrors. His reflection in the largest mirror moved last, waiting for him to make the first move. The whisper came again, warmer this time. "I've always been here." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. Every fiber of his body screamed to run toward the front door, into the fog, into freedom, but he couldn't. He felt as though the hallway, the room, the very air was holding him back. And then he noticed something. One of the mirrors began to fade, slowly. The version of him inside it smiled and stepped backward into the glass itself. The other mirrors followed. One by one, the reflections began retreating, melting into the walls, until only one remained. The last mirror, his own. I can't stay," Ethan whispered. The reflection tilted its head. "You never could," it said. "But you can carry a piece of this with you, if you let go." A chill passed through Ethan. His chest tightened. The floor beneath him felt like it was breathing. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the reflection was gone. The house exhaled. The glow receded. The whispers softened, turning into a calm, distant hum, like a lullaby carried by the wind. Margaret's voice came from behind him. "You see now?" she asked. "The house does not just keep, it releases too, but only when it trusts you." Ethan turned toward the hallway. The door to the porch was ajar, fog rolling softly into the room. A final pulse of red light pulsed through the walls, almost like a heartbeat, and then faded entirely. He stepped forward. The house did not try to stop him, but in the back of his mind, Ethan knew some part of him would never truly leave, and the house would always remember. Ethan walked through the fog that spilled into the hallway. Each step felt heavier, as if the house itself were weighing him down, gently, deliberately. The air smelled faintly of wet wood and old paper, familiar from the first day he arrived, yet somehow different, older, like it had been waiting for him to come back. He noticed the walls, names, thousands of them. They glowed faintly, etched deep into the wood, spiraling along the hallway like veins. Each name pulsed softly, as if alive. Margaret followed silently, her presence calm but commanding. "Every person who stays leaves a piece behind," she said. "The house remembers all of it, every hope, every fear, every regret." Ethan shivered. "What about the people who left?" he asked. "Are they gone forever?" "They leave fragments, moments, memories. The house keeps the ones it cannot let go of, but the rest drifts back into the world, slowly, sometimes years later, in ways you wouldn't notice." They reached a room at the end of the hallway. The door was wide open, glowing with a soft amber light. Inside, Ethan could see a library, tall shelves stacked with books that seemed impossibly old. Some were handwritten journals, others typed on machines long gone. Every book emitted a faint warmth, like it remembered the hands that had held it. "Read one. See what the house remembers." Ethan approached a journal on a pedestal. The cover was black and smooth, the title embossed in faded gold. "The Ones Who Stayed." He opened it. The first page showed a sketch of a man sitting at a desk. He looked like Ethan. The date written below,
decades ago. The pages told a story, stories he didn't recognize, lives he hadn't lived. But the handwriting, it was familiar, his own. The house had captured pieces of everyone who had stayed, and somehow their experiences had merged into something larger. A soft hum filled the room. The shadows in the corners twisted, forming faces. Each one whispered a name. Some were familiar, some were strangers. Then Ethan saw a drawing in the corner of a page, a house, a small red glow pulsing inside it, and inside the house, a single figure, him. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "The house remembers you," she said. "All of you. The one who arrived, the one who stayed, the one who left. All of them exist here now." Ethan closed the book. His hands trembled. "Does it ever forget?" he asked. Margaret shook her head. "Not completely, but it releases enough to let life continue outside its walls. And now, it's time for you to leave." The amber glow softened, guiding him toward the exit. The hallway stretched normally now, no longer bending or warping. The red glow was gone. The whispers faded to a distant murmur, like the wind in the trees outside.
Ethan stepped onto the porch. The fog rolled gently around him, but beyond it, the road awaited. The car. Freedom. He paused. For a moment, the house seemed alive. He felt it breathe, pulse, as though acknowledging his departure. A final whisper brushed against his ear. "Some part of you will always stay." Ethan exhaled, stepping into the fog. The house remained behind him, silent now, patient, eternal.
Ethan walked down the foggy road, the house shrinking behind him. The red glow and whispers were gone, replaced by a calm silence, broken only by the soft tap of rain on the pavement. For a moment, he thought it was over, that the house had released him, but he felt it, the pull, a gentle tug in the pit of his chest, a memory of the warmth he had felt, the whisper of familiarity, the sense that part of him had stayed behind. He looked back. The windows of the house were dark now, quiet, patient, eternal. Margaret's voice echoed softly in his mind, though she was nowhere near. "Some part of you will always stay." Ethan exhaled. His hands were trembling. He reached for the car, getting inside, and for a few minutes he simply sat, listening to the rain and the distant hum of tires on wet asphalt. Then it began. Soft whispers, almost imperceptible at first, threading through the corners of the car. Names, memories, fragments of moments he had left behind. He shook his head. Nothing. Just the rain. But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, he saw it. A shadow. Not a person. Not quite a reflection. A faint outline of the house, rising slowly from the fog. Red light pulsing faintly inside. He blinked. It was gone. He drove on. The road wound endlessly, curving through trees heavy with wet leaves. He passed landmarks he didn't recognize, houses, signs, bridges, but each felt vaguely familiar, as if the house had imprinted its memory on the world itself. By the time dawn broke, the fog had thinned. The red glow was nowhere. The world was normal, calm, quiet. Ethan pulled over and stepped out of the car. The air smelled of fresh rain. Birds chirped faintly. Sunlight began to break through the clouds. He exhaled. Relief. Freedom. And yet, in the deepest corner of his mind, he heard a faint, distant echo. A whisper carried on the wind. "You will return."
Ethan froze. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't anger. It was acknowledgement. The house had chosen what to keep, what to release, and in doing so, it had ensured that part of itself would remain alive in him, always.
He turned and looked back toward the horizon, expecting to see the house. Nothing. Only fog, only trees, only silence. And yet, deep down, he knew some part of him would always be there, waiting, listening, remembering. He exhaled again, slowly, and walked forward. The rain tapped softly around him, fading into a calm rhythm. The house waited, patient, eternal, and the echoes of those who had stayed whispered forever in the walls of Darkfall Lullabies.